I'm here with Zach Bush, MD, and endocrinologist, I believe, is one of your many sort of like accolades. You want to tell the world what you do and what you specialize in?
Sure. My background's in allopathic Western medicine, kind of inside the box training. I was trained in internal medicine, which is kind of the foundation for general adult care, hospital-based medicine and the like. So I was at the University of Virginia at that point with my postdoctoral work. And then after internal medicine, went on to endocrinology and metabolism, which is a 3-year fellowship in studying hormones and mitochondria. So hormones and how they regulate the functions of the body, and the mitochondria that produce our fuel, which is the metabolism side of the field. And so you've got this whole kind of coordination of human biology and health on that side. And that actually got me into cancer research, and so started developing chemotherapies, and that chemotherapy research got me into vitamin A. And after a while I realized vitamin A was from food, and was starting to realize the power of food to impact cancer cells. And that was kind of the revolution that took me to leaving academia in 2010 and started a nutrition center for reversing chronic disease. In 2013, we stumbled upon some molecules made by bacteria and fungi that looked like the chemotherapy I used to make, and found that in soil. And so the idea that maybe soil could be our most potent source of medicine on the planet was a new idea for me, and that really took me down my whole new world now. So I run a few biotech companies. We've developed compounds from bacteria and fungi from fossil soils that are for animal health at the big ag level for cattle, sheep, poultry, that kind of thing, all the way down to your animal pets in the home, and then of course human health as well. So we have dietary supplements in all of those realms. And then in my determination to figure out why humanity is collapsing as much as our health is collapsing, so are our socioeconomic structures and our politics and everything else, and certainly the American empire is collapsing now. And so looking at all of that, I came to realize that in my research that had discovered cell-cell communication and how communication can coordinate massively complicated systems, that's always regenerative, meaning you always have more, not less, over time. It's gotten me into the whole idea of starting a regenerative society and basing that on microbial models of nature. And so now we're working on reinventing the internet and how we would build a new society in this kind of civil liberties environment where everybody owns their own space online, and we eliminate the commoditization of our behaviors. And so that's one of my big passions right now.
Wow, so that stretches across health, tech, and even politics. I mean, very political what you're doing. It's amazing. One of the things that really blew my mind, because I love like when I remember shit that I learned in school and somebody like triggers that memory that I haven't thought about in 20 years. And I'm like, oh yeah, mitochondria, that rings a bell. In the stupid science book, they slice the cell open and it's the little peanut looking thing, right?
Yeah.
But you had a whole nother swing on that. Do you want to inform everybody what that stuff really is?
Yeah, so you've been told in the mitochondria are like these little structures within the human cell, and they make the energy for the human cell and all this, which makes it sound very human, but we now very well know that these are not human structures. These are complex bacterial-like structures that actually are akin to viruses in their genome. They have a little ring virus DNA strand. There's 3 different species of these bugs that live inside of our cells, and human cells can't live without them. And so it's a fascinating symbiotic relationship that we have from the moment we're a single-celled, fertilized egg in the womb. From there on out, we're dependent on these weird little bugs that live inside our cells. And the biology textbook that you mentioned always depicts like 2 or 3 of these guys floating around.
Yeah.
Totally inaccurate. You do electron microscopy, you suddenly realize there's like 200 mitochondria in every human cell. So we are crammed full of these bugs that are living inside our cells, producing energy. And the interesting thing of what they're producing is they're actually making carbon molecules. And so they're taking complex carbon molecules like fatty acids or sugars and turning those ultimately into carbon dioxide, and in that process they liberate energy by breaking carbon bonds. And that energy release is then the way in which we produce ATP, which is really the fuel our cells run on.
That's like the electric energy, right?
It's the electric energy. It's this kind of bond stored energy. So it's like a battery where you're creating a salt to store and then release energy. And so in the same way, the mitochondria are building this kind of resource for us for energy release. The very cool thing that then we start to see as we start to think of those mitochondria in their true form is we find out what they're really producing at the base level is electron flow. And so electricity is flowing out of these at a very high rate. And the amount of electrical magnetic radiation and energy made by mitochondria is a little dumbfounding. And so
it's like really far reaching, isn't it? Doesn't it extend well beyond your body?
It does, yeah. We all glow, and we've kind of known that since probably the beginning of time, and shamanic kind of environments. But even in Western medicine over the last 50 years, we've had to embrace that anything from a pencil to a crystal to a human body puts off an energy field.
Yeah.
And that energy field, this kind of emanating force from within us, is reflected in the amount of energy we produce at the mitochondrial level. And it's really created in that space. To channel all that energy through your body, you have to have fiber optic cables. And so we build all these fiber optic cables, tens of millions of them between the cells, and those tiny little fiber optic cables are controlled by little apertures or camera lenses on the end of every single one of these things. And keep in mind, these little fiber optic cables are like 1,000 times smaller than a human hair, and yet they're these perfect tubes with a perfect three-dimensional aperture structure that can close and open to let different amounts of light energy through it. And so in a healthy body, you're literally channeling light energy to keep coherent information. Just like we use the fiber optics in IT environments, right now most of our internet globally is transacted over fiber optic cables, which is just light energy pulsing at different frequencies and at different vibration, and you get that whole information stream going. Our body was the original fiber optic network.
It's so funny. When I see people like, I mean, I don't want to get too hippy-dippy spiritual, but when I see people talk about how, like, the body as a cohesive system happened by accident, even though all of the systems are like completely interdependent on one another, and with one messed up, it dies. That blows my mind, and this offers a different perspective to where, like, we're modeling technology after nature's technology, which is the sentient technology and the most natural, in my opinion.
100%, yeah. And I think as we look at our consumptive procedures that we have on the planet right now, like, we are consuming natural resources at an insane rate, and we haven't figured out how to put those back into nature in the correct fashion. We disrupt carbon cycles instead of join in carbon cycles. CO2 that we're emitting into our atmosphere is a totally natural and important element for the carbon cycle on the planet, and yet politically and everything else, we've come to regard this as like this toxin, this poison, and we're making too much CO2.
Meanwhile, it's the air that you breathe.
Yeah,
that's exactly. A little messed up.
When in reality, we just screwed up the carbon cycle. We should produce CO2 through everything. Our respiratory cycle, our mitochondrial cycles, all these produce CO2, and so that CO2 production should be this natural process. What's happened is we killed the reabsorption or the recycling by killing soil. And so through killing soils worldwide, we've left some 97% of Earth's soils now damaged or destroyed. We've killed the ability of the planet Earth to bring its own carbon back into the cycle and regenerate the soil, literally build soil from the air. You can build volume of soil from air, and so we can do this very quickly. You can build a centimeter or two of soil in 10 years from air if you allow the microbiome, the fungi, and all of the work done in there to translate that carbon energy back into the material that you would expect to see in soil.
And enrich it. You were showing the difference between like real dirt, which has like a lot of, it sticks together, there's earthworms in it, and then after the farms, it's like sand. It's like dry, dusty sand, it's dead.
It's dead.
And I want you to touch on all of that, especially like what's causing it, particularly, the whole glyphosate thing and the origins of that particular chemical and where it came from.
Yeah. So glyphosate is the most ubiquitous herbicide, pesticide on the planet right now. Its origins are out of warfare, and so in the 1960s, Monsanto developed Agent Orange to kill the jungles of South Asia. We bombed the hell out of the whole Ho Chi Minh Trail over and over and over again until we created a moonscape, literally hundreds and hundreds of miles of just decimated, dead soil, jungle, and it's devastating. Just think about the amount of ferns and the plant life that was ancient in those jungles that we killed. But then all the biologic life. How many monkeys did we burn up in that Agent Orange slaughter and everything else? And so monkeys and snakes and lizards and just this biodiversity just got slaughtered in that decade or 15 years of Agent Orange. And then the war ends suddenly in 1973, 1974. There's no more demand, and so Monsanto turns its attention to killing other types of plants. And so it goes in the same category called organophosphates, that is the Agent Orange molecule. It finds a patent for this glyphosate molecule, and glyphosate would then be repatented by Monsanto, not as a weed killer actually, but as an antibiotic, antimicrobial. It kills the biology of the soil, and that thus kills the plant. And so in that, kind of manufacturing of chemical warfare into our agricultural systems in the 1970s, we fundamentally changed food on Earth. And so That's when we deleted the alkaloids out of our food by the use of this glyphosate molecule. The alkaloids are the medicine in our food.
Yeah.
We've known since the beginning of medicine, 4,000 years ago, that food is the medicine. And we deleted the medicine out of the food in those 1970s, 80s, and high speed in the 1990s when we went to the GMO crops where we can directly spray the corn and soybean and everything else. And so now we're growing food that's devoid of any medicine, devoid of any real nutrient quality, and it's just empty calories. And so that's what's happened to the obesity epidemic, the metabolic collapse, the cancer epidemic, and ultimately now we find out all of the neurologic conditions from autism to Alzheimer's dementia, microbiome related. So we kill the microbiome by eating and drinking Roundup, which is an antibiotic. We kill the biodiversity of the soil of our gut, and we end up deficient, weakened immune systems, prone to viral infection, prone to fungal infections. Why? Because we have lost the balance of that complex ecosystem network.
Wow, that's insane. So your work is essentially dedicated to trying to solve this problem, correct?
Yeah.
What's the working solution so far?
Yeah, so our teacher has been the fossil soils, and so we're working with 60 million year old soil. And from that, we've learned that human biology responds extremely rapidly to this communication network. And so you get very fast reproduction of damaged proteins, enzyme pathways, and the like, all just rev up within seconds of exposure to this 60 million year old data from fossil soil. And so that's been an exciting information stream to say the soil is the best medicine on Earth. The soil is the empowering source of life on Earth, which shouldn't be surprising given its role as the foundation of biologic life on the planet. And so as we reconnect to that, we see this amazing healing potential that as physicians we're told nobody has.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to tell you at the pharmaceutical level that you can heal, because you need like 7 medications, and then you're going to have chronic irritable bowel syndrome after that, so we'll put you on some chronic medicine. And so there is no impetus from the current economies that kind of reign for us to put into play a true healing message. And so my clinic is less about finding all the supplements that we love. That's kind of the functional medicine movement. We're much more about what we're calling the intrinsic health movement, to realize intrinsically in your body you have the capacity to heal.
Yes.
You don't need to reach outside of yourself. You need to reconnect to Mother Nature, and she will heal you. To do this at the grander scale, then now we're working with farmers to help them understand the relationship to the soil. It's amazing that most farmers have not thrown a shovel into their farm. They've never even walked most of their soil. And so to get a farmer out of their tractors and out of their spraying machines and get to walk on the dirt and really look at it in our soil health academies, they're just over and over again just amazed at the obvious observations that can be made looking at chemically treated versus regenerative soils. It's like night and day. You don't have to have any extensive biology degree to get that immediately. So these farmers who are brilliant people, once empowered back to the information on how they're going to get there, they immediately realize the economic incentive. Because if they can regenerate their soils, they stop putting all these expensive chemical and fertilizer inputs, they can build their own nutrient base that gets richer with every passing year. They've got this thing they can pass on to their children again. And so we have multi-generation farms that are reinvigorating. Children are coming back to the farms with the realization that their parents are no longer depressed and hopeless and failing. And there's new economy coming back in. And so in the 5 million acres that we aim to regenerate with the help of all the consumers, we're going to create an economic demonstration that I think will very quickly convince the other 130 million acres to come along without any help at all. Because we will show the economic advantage of 5x, 10x income levels for these farmers and break the back of their codependence with the banks.
Now that economic incentive is due to the fact that they grow better and even faster in this soil?
They grow bigger, happier plants across the board that are resistant to all the pathogens that they thought they had to be spraying for. Right? And so,
that sounds familiar.
And so you create a healthy immune system in the plant. Of course you don't need all the pesticides at the same level. You create healthy soil. There is no role for weeds. There's only biodiversity. And so we use 32 species cover crops. we get animals involved in food production instead of being food. We need to stop eating all the cattle. We need to put the cattle back out in the role of the bison, that they kept all of our soils healthy across the planet.
I saw that grazing and stepping on it and squishing it actually creates a tiny little layer. It allows like not all the sunlight to get in, and it's like the genesis for that little like recovery system.
Yeah, and so they high speed it up, and so you put a 32 species cover crop, high speed the cattle through that. You're moving them every 6 hours, so it's not like you put them there for a season. Every 6 hours you're moving them through just electric fence paddocks, moving them quickly, and in that they're dropping, their cow patties and their urine and all that's giving back all this incredible nutrient information on the soil, as well as, like you say, the hoof impact on the soil causes aeration and shifts in microbial diversity and all of this action. And so really inspiring that we can take dead soil that's been killed through 20 years of chemical farming, and in 1 year they have healthier soils than have been seen in generations.
Wow, just
Mother Earth is waiting to heal.
That's insane, and I think it applies to us too internally. It's the micro and the macrocosm. It's the same thing. I feel some serious ailments, and even like, so I transitioned to a very alkaline diet. That was like what I kept calling back to. Everyone's like, don't eat this, don't eat that. I'm like, I've tried everything. I'm a scientist. Let's see what happens. But it seemed that like the more alkalizing things I ate, like you said, the alkaloids, that was where the healing came from. That was where hydration came from, and that was where almost like electrical energy seemed to come from. It was like a saltwater battery. Can you touch on like what pH actually is to a layman and why it's so significant in the human body?
Yeah, so there's a lot of confusion around this, so it's a good topic. So there's two words that are extremely similar in biochemistry, and that's alkaline and alkalinity. And so alkaloids are a totally different thing, but alkalinity and alkaline are two different things. So an alkaline pH means that you have a high pH, you're the opposite of acid.
Yeah.
Alkalinity means how much acid can that compound absorb.
Okay.
And ultimately, alkaline water, for example, is a huge fad right now.
Yeah,
Alkaline water doesn't work at all because it has a very low, what we call pKa. So its ability to absorb acid is like 0. So as soon as you drink, pH 11 water, the second it touches your stomach acid at 3.2, it has a pH of 3.2. And so it does nothing to change the pH of the body. What does change the pH of the body is alkalinity. And so foods that have high alkalinity, would be examples of it would be like the cucumber, for example. And so as you eat cucumbers, it has a cooling effect on the body because it's not trying to change the pH of your stomach. Once it gets metabolized through the bacterial biome, into your liver, through the liver, into the bloodstream, the alkalinity of those compounds starts to demonstrate its ability to absorb acid from the environment. And so it's that absorption capacity. So we need to help the marketing teams that keep putting out all this stuff understand the difference between alkaline and alkalinity, because it's created a bunch of bogus products on one hand, but also it's diluted or distracted us from the real health potential. You look at something like watermelon, the traditional watermelon, the cucumber, celery. These things have such interesting capacities, but then, and those are all, if you check their pH, also happen to be alkaline. An acidic compound that has very high alkalinity is apple cider vinegar.
Yeah, citric acid, right?
Yeah, and so yeah. Essentially, it's actually up the scale from that. But the alkalinity that's in the apple cider vinegar, here you have a pH low, so you've got an acid. You take that, and its ability to absorb acid from the liver or other systems of the body is high.
It has an affinity to it.
Because it has an affinity for the acid, and so that alkalinity in an acid compound is something that's kind of escaped the typical marketing and consumer mind, but is critical. And so for my patients with chronic acidic type systems, whether it's immune dysfunction or heartburn or whatever it is, just that tablespoon of apple cider vinegar and about 4 ounces of water, chug that every morning. Don't put anything in your mouth until that goes in. You can have that radical shift in the pH of the tissues of the body more than you would the stomach or something like that.
So it's essentially kind of almost like plumbing.
I mean, it is very interesting. I mean, it's tempting to think of the whole system as plumbing, but it would miss the quantum physics of the whole thing.
Okay.
So you have to remember nothing's solid. Like this thing's 99.99% packed in space, and so is the tube of the. So what is actually creating these senses of compartments within the body, or these plumbing systems. You got the gut, and then you have the blood vessels running to the liver, and then from the liver to the heart, and from the heart to the lungs back to the heart out to the whole periphery, all these tubes, and then the kidney tubules and all that. Remembering those are effervescent structures that are always in this quantum state of replacement and repair and everything else. What's creating the sense of stability in those spaces is something called tight junctions, which is like Velcro that sits between the human cells. And that Velcro creates a space in which we can put the fiber optic cables behind it. And so we have the Velcro that holds things together, and then we can lay down the fiber optic cables, and now you have light energy going through the system. Now the light energy is really modulating the space better than anything else, right? Light is your energetic force that's creating the sense of density and the physical structures around it. And so that light energy flowing from one cell to another, turns out that Roundup, not only is it a potent antibiotic, destroys the Velcro and makes the gap junctions fall apart.
And then you say the cells lose their cohesive sort of behavior because that's like almost like the mesh.
Yes, and once you get that isolated cell, you now have a precursor to cancer.
Okay.
And so you're taking healthy, connected cells that are the opposite of cancer, and you blow them apart, and suddenly you've got all this precancerous activity throughout the body. Gut for sure, then the blood-brain barrier and the vascular system, then the kidney tubules, everything kind of blowing apart into this isolated, vulnerable space.
Wow. I have one final question that needs to be addressed because I think the most underrated organ system in the body is the digestive system, and particularly the gut. So I'm curious, one, like, I can't remember all the finite medical details because my background isn't engineering, but you were saying something along the lines of there's a gut-brain connection that is so much more crucial in terms of things like serotonin production and like things that we think of as like brain problems.
Yeah.
So can you touch on, I guess just the significance of maintaining a healthy gut?
Yeah. The gut-brain axis has been like the theme of the 2010, 20 kind of era. So we're in the decade of the gut-brain era here. And in this gut-brain era, we've come to realize that the neural density in the gut lining is huge. So the amount of neurons that you have in your gut is about equivalent to the mass of a dog's brain.
Wow.
And so you have this second brain that is the gut lining, massive amount of afferent and efferent vessels. You have your whole autonomic nervous system via mostly the vagus nerve that innervates everything from the back of the mouth all the way to the colon. You got this huge system of innervation and kind of coordination of systems, everything from the peristalsis of the gut to the acid production in the stomach, release from the gallbladder and pancreas, the digestive enzymes. All this massive system is coordinated by this dense system of neurons. And so our first aspects of the gut-brain axis was understanding that, okay, this huge second brain is connected to the first brain, and so they must coordinate it. It's gotten totally bizarre, though, in the last couple years as we've started to get really good at doing very tiny microscopic digital imaging where we can actually differentiate one cell from another in a living system. And so kind of like a CAT scan looks at the whole body and you can see different things, we can now do that at a microscopic level and show the relationships between an epithelial cell or the protective cell in the gut lining with the enteric endocrine cells and their relationship. We now realize that the enteric endocrine cells are 10 to 15% of the lining, and that's, as you say, the factory for serotonin and dopamine. And so we make 90% of the serotonin that our body will produce in our gut lining. We make over 50% of the dopamine. Another 40% of the dopamine from the total body is produced in the kidney tubules. So between the gut and the kidneys, we've got 90% of the serotonin, 90% of the dopamine. And like you say, instead of like addressing why is everybody depressed suddenly, maybe because we all started eating antibiotics and killing our microbiome, instead we say, oh, well, there's just not enough serotonin and dopamine in the brain, so here's a drug that will prevent your ability to reuptake that serotonin and dopamine, and you block the whole recycling process, and that'll kind of give you a little more sense of serotonin. And so we're like running on fumes with serotonin and dopamine, and we make something just keep the fumes in the right compartment instead of making more serotonin. So it's important to realize antidepressants, anti-anxiety compounds do not make more neurotransmitters. If anything, they undermine your ability to produce these compounds. And so if we back up yet to some more exciting data is that not only is the enteric endocrine cell making all of this, serotonin and dopamine, we now realize that it has to have the right bacteria sitting on top of it. And so the bacteria, the microbiome, is giving information to the enteric endocrine cells to make serotonin and dopamine or not. And so depending on which microbes you have in your gut will determine how much serotonin and dopamine you have, how much resilience you have for coping mechanisms, how much stress you can tolerate, and the rest, as you kill the microbiome, your risk of major depression goes up. So one course of antibiotics in a year, 24% increase in major depression, 17% increase in anxiety. 2 courses of antibiotics, 54% increase in major depression, 44% increase in anxiety disorder. Most of our population is routinely exposed to 2 or 3 courses of antibiotics a year, and so you see this incredible, desolation happening at the factory of neurotransmitters. As you back up now out of this kind of paradigm, you suddenly realize the microbes are the beginning of thought. The microbes are really the beginning of consciousness.
The basis of consciousness? Wow, that's sort of like the end thesis that you made, and I'd never resonated with me more. I'll end it on this. You remember, you've seen the Star Wars movie, obviously?
Yeah.
Well, the whole concept of the Force, which I just think is basically an analogy for the ether. What do they say that they used, the Jedi, to channel the Force? They used metachlorons. How similar is that word to mitochondria? And it's the same concept. Thousands and thousands of little microbial things are tapping into the Force and allowing you to do backflips and levitate shit. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's something more to that.
I would agree with you. Feel this. Check that out.
Thank you so much, Zach, for sitting down. We're going to do everything we can to get you to Narcadelphia because we got some bad endocrine systems in South Philly, dude. That needs some serious fixing.
Yeah. All right. Good to meet you guys. Pleasure to see all of you. Thanks for getting the word out.
Thanks, Zach. Appreciate it, man.
If you enjoy this type of content, smash the likes, because it really does help spread the message. Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell button, otherwise you will not get notified when we drop dope videos like this. Anarchadelphia is gonna be sick. We've already sold quite a few tickets, so we're definitely having a party. You can get your tickets at anarchadelphia.com. The schedule is there, as well as some info about our after parties. And speaking about a pre-party, we're headed out to Anarcho Vegas. If you haven't gotten your ticket yet, you can use promo code TSOA at checkout. With respect to the OG, where TSOA was catalyzed, where so many more minds will meet at Anarcho Vegas, this is a movement. The state of anarchy is now. Anarchadelphia is a conference dedicated to the principles of liberty, individual sovereignty, and freedom from coercion, located in Philadelphia, the cradle of liberty. Anarchadelphia seeks to shed light on issues such as geopolitics, blockchain economics, spiritual health and wellness, as well as exposing the Earth's sacred hidden knowledge, featuring Mark Passio, Max Egan, Derek Brose, Jeff Berwick, and many more this September 13th through 15th. For info and tickets, visit anarchadelphia.com.